We're doing the third session. Kimona Numa had to be away today, so this is Fineth Jernigan. I'm going to be doing this training session, and I want to welcome all of you to the BIM Storm training. Where today we're going to focus a little differently. Kimon showed an awful lot of ways to build models from scratch, to be able to do some of the really interesting things that the Enuma system is capable of. Well, today I wanted to start first of all by just thanking those of you that have uploaded your ideas, been jumping into the system and trying it out. And I thought I'd start with just a few screenshots of some of the work that has been in the system. These have been in the system for a few days. I actually noticed that there were a whole bunch of people who at least created a project here right at the last minute today, either in the last hour or two. I understand there may have been a homework assignment associated with that, so well, thank you for all at least jumping in at that level. But let me just quick run through a few of the things that people have been loading, and down the road, as we go through here, maybe we can talk about some of the things that hopefully you'll be doing with these models that you've started to create. I guess just first, Adam Hinkle put up looks like a couple buildings, exploring a couple of different buildings. Dave Goldstein had, it looks like, had started his exploration. This was one of the more interesting things that somebody that I guess FS&B, Erica Compton, had created, where they're exploring, I guess, a semicircular building that's carving out some water into the site from the river. It's kind of an interesting exercise, at least a good starting point. As I think everybody may know at this point, Kelsey and Tammy have been uploading things for several weeks, so obviously their stuff is in there. Michael Sen had started looking at some things. I guess Tammy had been doing some work with, I guess, starting to look at putting in some site polygons, maybe some looking at site layouts and things. And I guess Todd Moran had started another little study for a 9-story building, and that's pretty much what we've been seeing at this point. We're hoping that everybody starts getting into using the system, building on what's started. But it's good to get started. You have to jump in somewhere on this system to make it be of value. So today, what I wanted to try to do is I wanted to try to go over some of the technical details about what happens once you have a model in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a project. I'm going to create a new scheme, and I'm going to show you some of the things we've put up to make some of your operations a little easier here over the last few days. I do want to just draw everybody's attention before we get started with that. If you look at the shared schemes on your list as you're going into the system, you'll see that we've uploaded a whole group of prototype buildings. One of the things we've noticed with this BIM storm in particular, this seems to be, we're having a little trouble getting off the ground with projects to be able to jump into the things like cost estimating and lead checklists and some of the other things that are really the meat of what the Enuma system lets you do. And so what we've done, and this is a very normal workflow within the system, is we've uploaded some prototypes that will help you get started. We've got a hospital, some mixed-use residential and office kind of buildings, museum, a community college campus, which actually Kimon showed that last week, prototyping it on one of the junkyard areas, one of the, I guess, recycling areas that are near the river. We put up a courthouse, some educational buildings and assembly buildings, and then a group of residential mixed-use buildings. So within these schemes, within these, there are all different levels of fleshed out concepts. Some of them have much more detail than others. Some actually go right down to the level of furniture and all kinds of other things in the buildings. Some of them have sensors. There's just all kinds of things in there. So they're intended to give you a place to start, make it really easy to start. You don't have to. When we talk about you not needing to be a planner or a designer to use this stuff, this is, you can think of this as somebody's already designed it. Now you're coming in and you're doing analysis. You're doing the other things that people have to do to actually get projects built within the city. Okay, so with that, as you're exploring, I'm going to show you how you would take these into a project. I'm going to bring a couple of them in, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go in and look at cost estimating them. We're going to go in and look at maybe on one of them we'll fill out a lead checklist and talk about some of the issues associated with that stuff.
Hey, we also have a chat here. Please show us to see more than one studio folder. Also, they've uploaded a Rivet model to test. And any suggestions on that? And the project is the Ryan Williams project.
Okay, well, let's look at that. So, see more than one studio folder. Okay, well, I'll go in the studios. Here are the studios, and we may be, the terminology within the Enuma system is a little different than some other areas, but studios come close to relating to a client. So, BIMstorm Oklahoma City has a studio. There are many other studios. This is kind of the first level of security within the system. So, if you're a member and a team member in one of the people who work on a studio, you have access to these other studios. If you haven't participated in them, or if you're not part of these, you'd only see the studios that you are part of. Is that so? Are we asking for something other than really studios, or?
Yeah, I think they were just confused on the terminology. So it's really they just wanted to point you to
Ryan Williams folder. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see if we can find that. Ryan. So we've got two Ryan Williams folder. No, I'm sorry, one Ryan. This one. Okay. And do they say, Amber? Do they say which project it is? Which scheme it is?
They have not yet.
Okay, Lee. Do you know which of the
mixed use?
Is? Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay, so rather than my creating a new project, I'm going to duplicate this scheme, and then I can do something with it. Since really this scheme belongs to Ryan, and if I start messing with it, it will get destroyed. So let me go back and duplicate this scheme, and we'll. So for those of you who haven't done this, when you go back to the scheme level, here's the mixed use scheme. There are a group of little icons here in the middle. The first one's an information icon that shows some site statistics, lets you get to reports, has a dashboard. Let's just, for interest, see what's in the dashboard for this that came in from Revit. So no work's been done on this other than it coming in from Revit, if I understand correctly. So there's a live link to the model, and so we're already carrying. And I'm going to show you where these are and how these come about. But we're already carrying a estimated construction cost on this model. We're carrying the amount of roof area where you'll get stormwater runoff, carrying some operation and maintenance costs, and estimated utilities. Obviously, don't have any work orders. It's not gone to that level yet. and we don't really have any data that's set up, so we don't really have pie charts or any of those analysis things. But as you can see, there's a fair amount of information that came in via the system just by uploading the Revit model. Okay, so if you continue on here, there's a little export button, and then there at the last one's the duplicate button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to just call it mixed use test, just to give it a new name. I'm going to send it over to one of my projects within this studio, and then just hit proceed. Okay, so now we're in this project, and as you notice, one of the things that one of the little one of the cautions related to the Enuma system, there are several things in here that are necessary in order to sort of maintain control of what goes on. So one of them is the view and edit mode. In order to do anything on a model, you really need to be in an edit mode, otherwise you're really just viewing. So the first thing I've done here is, since I've got this new project created, I am in edit mode, so I can work with this model. There are three other keys in this right panel that you need to be aware of and just be thinking about. There's this cross, which is the toggle for drag. If I want to drag this model, that toggle needs to be turned on, so it needs to be red. So when it's red, I can move it around. And oh, by the way, when you let's see, I'm sorry. So Ryan, when you go back to your model, all this moving around I'm doing won't be affecting your model. So when I do work here, I'm really working on a literal copy of the model. So I can do anything to your model, and it's not going to affect your model, for what it's worth. Okay, so the first one's a toggle. If I turn that toggle off, yeah, the building really sets still. It doesn't go anywhere. Same thing with the toggle right next to it, which is the reshape toggle. If I want to add anything, change anything, do anything to this model, move things around, I have to have the reshape toggle turned on. If I turn it off, it'll act like I'm going to do something, but I'll be there kind of wondering why the heck nothing's moving around. Another key that everybody really you need to pay attention to is the one right below that, which really turns on the dimensions. Okay, and so when it's turned on and you're in edit mode, you start seeing the dimensions on the model, and if you double click on any dimension, you get a pop-up box that basically tells you the dimension. You can actually change the dimension here if you choose to. So that wall now is 360 feet long instead of 359 and change. And I can actually change the angle. Depending on what I've selected, I can either change the angle of that line, or it will actually rotate the whole image or the whole plan. It kind of depends on where I'm at, but I'm not going to change any of the angles right now. So those are some buttons that you really need to just sort of stay aware of. Remember the edit view mode. Normally, if you're playing around in the model and nothing's working, I can tell you from long experience and a lot of heartache and a lot of hours trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, I was probably not in edit mode. So edit view is really important. And then same deal, you'll be moving around thinking thinking you've got this all figured out, and the reshape button will be off, and you won't be able to figure out why the heck you can't move stuff around, and it'll be because you don't have the reshape button on. So so with that, let's see what this thing looks like in 3D real quick. Okay.
They also asked a question about it shows ghosted, and I think they mean the slabs, all the additional slabs, and that could be that each,
ghosted in
like,
3D.
no, when
Here?
you see it in plan view, I'm trying to interpret what they asked.
Gotcha.
it might be all the layers of the slabs that they're talking about or asking questions about, and
Well,
that's
let's see. Well,
how
let's
their
see what we
Revit
got over here.
model
Yeah.
is created.
Yeah, well, this model came in, and I guess let's just stay here in the plan view for a minute more. This model came in as five stories above grade in a basement level. It did not come in with any spaces, and this is one of the actually it did come in with one space on the fourth floor. This is one of the issues with sometimes when Revit models are brought in. The Enuma system, in order to bring models in, you really have to have slabs and spaces, rooms, slabs and rooms and Revit terminology, I believe. Um, when you bring them in with no spaces, even if the room is the whole floor, you do give up some control. You give up the ability to look at things like net to gross and some of the other things that go on. You can still compute. Uh, you can tell them and I'll show you how to tell the model that it really doesn't have any spaces in it, so you can still do all the computations. But in general terms, it's particularly if you're working in Revit, you're working in that higher detail. Just doing that concept model is probably not enough. You need to take it a little further with some spaces if you can. That's why normally we push the workflow coming from the Enuma system going to Revit, because the spaces are critical. That's how you maintain all the data connections through the life of your project. And if the spaces are created in the Enuma system, they're given a unique identifier that can track into Revit and to other softwares, and then you can do a bi-directional information exchange, and so you can always be up to date. But let's okay. But so we've. My guess is the reason you're seeing all this ghosting is you've got all these floors. It's just how Revit represents everything. And Amber, do you know enough about this to tell them how to make this go away, or are they stuck with this?
They just have to set up the model as far as it's one slab per level as you're working in
Mm-hmm.
Revit. And also they had a question about they only imported one room, and when you're working with Revit, and if you want to start in Revit, that's fine. What you need to do is you need to have a slab, and even though you have your internal walls and materials and all those things called out in Revit, if you do not put a space object within those internal walls, you will not get your spaces in the Enuma system.
Right. You can add them manually when later, but you can't if you don't. They won't be there when you start. Right.
Yeah, if you're in Revit, you have to use that space object. And here, I'll look it up really quick to make sure I'm using the exact
Yeah, I think
terminology.
it's room in Revit, I think, but that's
Oh, okay.
um, but let's just look at this. Let's just continue looking at the model, and hopefully that will start to answer some of the questions. So the model did come through. You see it, and hopefully that's close to what you hoped for, at least from a massing standpoint. Let's look at some of the data things. Let's see. Let's look at construction status. So um, so basically everything is new construction, and seeing some of the line work that's in here, my guess is, as Amber was saying, this model may have multiple slabs. There's a when a model's created outside of the Enuma system, and you've got to say you had a slab for a floor slab and you had another slab for a ceiling. um, they start doing funny things to the computations, and you're starting to double up square footage and things. And my guess is that with some of these lines are associated with that kind of stuff, but I don't really know at this point. We'd have to get into the details of it. The nice thing is, though, has come through. It is carrying square footage, but it's showing that the building that what basically you've got here is you've got multiple buildings all mashed up together, because see, it's showing building one is only 948 square feet, and I'm pretty sure this whole thing is much larger than that. So yeah, see, it's like the ground floor level is 100,945 square feet. So there's all kinds of things mashed up into one. Um, my suggestion to you would be the ideal way to do this right now would be to go back and trace your floors in the Enuma system and then push it back out to Revit, and you'll find that this is all cleaned up on both sides. But let's continue with this exercise, because there is a lot of data here. There's a lot of, you've got a 15,476 square foot fifth floor, so there's a lot of data here. Let's see if any of the space volumes. You notice there's the one room that was included on the fourth floor level. You can see it up here right there, and it is carrying. So that basically what's happening is, since you only have one room in the space and there's a slab under it, evidently that's what it's carrying is the gross building area. And so so that's that 948 square feet. So just as I guess as you're doing Revit models, or you're doing a model in almost any, if you're going to come in from another model, really does need spaces. Okay, so let's go back and look at
those spaces will also cover, once you occupy them with the room object, if you have component pieces such as stairs or chairs or pieces of equipment, those will come in as well when you export using the Enuma Revit plugin, and
gotcha.
Using the furniture checkmark to export it. Now, since they're not Enuma specific components, what will happen is they may come in as blobs, but those blobs will have all the data associated with them as far as what the object is and how it is. And we do have some minor issues with certain components, but you will actually get an error text list that will tell you every component that didn't make it, and we are working through those. So
gotcha. Yeah, and so basically, what Amber's saying is that if you build a Revit, if you just got to come into the system with from a Revit model, as opposed to starting the concept in the system, and you put in rooms and spaces and stairways and other components, other families. For the most part, when the model comes back into the Enuma system, all of those things come with it. The system, since this is a planning system, the whole idea is to not pull it's really to manage the data within the model. And so the models within the Enuma system tend to take the information necessary to do life cycle data management, and some of the things that are really just graphically, they're the 3D visualization type of issues, don't come through. But what will end up happening, it goes in the Enuma system, you do the work in the Enuma system, then it goes back, but it maintains the unique ID on those objects. And so you'll be back to an object in Revit just like you started with, even though it came in the Enuma system. It may look totally different, may not even have graphics associated with it, maybe a blob, as Amber talked about. But the connection back to your Revit model is maintained when that's all happening. So as it goes back, you're right back to that same object.
And another question they have is, Tammy asked if we could talk about cost and comparison of buildings in this session.
Yes, let's do this next. Okay, so we've got this model. There's some issues that will need to be cleaned up, but we have a model, so let's look at what happens within the system of cost. So I'm going to now go to, and I don't know that we've really done this before in the training much, but let's go to the settings section. I think, and I'm pretty sure Kimon at least touched on this, but in the settings section, this is where all of the data, both analysis, and this is where you get to your data outside of just a presentation report kind of thing. And so within the settings area, you've got general settings, site settings, building settings, and space settings. So they pretty much line up with the categories of space that are in the graphic view. So within the general settings area, you've got a group of sub areas, and this is where in the custom settings you start setting up custom attributes. Hopefully, if we get time, we'll look at that. We may or may not. One thing that even at this level that becomes important to people is departments. So this is where you would say, okay, I've got a housing area, I'm doing housing, and I've got a bedroom, and this is where you would classify spaces to give them, relationships and color codes, and a lot of that happens in the general part of this. In the site settings, we have a group of settings that are things such as the site name. So there's the same name that I started with. We're able to put in, either have already or put in a lot of the project data. If these blank boxes are filled out, the system will actually automate reporting for you. So many clients like this bottom stuff, the federal government has a 1391 form, which is their form for describing projects. If these boxes are filled in, it will automate filling out those forms. There's also the capability, the system automatically maintains how much effectively pervious area there is in a site and impervious area. So you can actually go in and sort of set some parameters how you deal with those type of things. And also within the site settings, there's the site work cost settings. And typically the site work costs are going to come in as 0, because normally you're not putting a site in when you first start out. But all of you who do estimating at a parametric or early stage level will notice this is pretty much a standard costing approach, where you set your locality adjustment, you set your contingencies, and you actually can set, if you have an idea of when the project is going to build, you can set your midpoint of construction, and it basically either knows, or you can set what your escalation factors are, and you put all your fees and all that stuff in, and boom, at the bottom of it you have a project site cost, a site cost for the whole project. There's some other attribute things. Let's jump though into the building side, because that's really where the costing and some of the other things that we can deal with right now are. So in the building area, the first section is on floors, and this is the place where when the Revit model was built, we basically had a floor to floor height of 20 feet for the basement, and then 15 feet for each of the other floors. We also had the first floor at the ground at 0 basically, and the basement going into the grade, right? So that's the minus 20. So all of this the system took out of the Revit model, and the slabs that are there, we must have had a 1'6" first floor slab, but all the rest of the slabs were 8-inch slabs. These can actually be set here, and they'll change the model. I'm not going to go back out to the 3D right this second. We'll hold that for kind of later looking at it. But just so we'll have a really clear representation of what goes on here, I've just made the 4th floor 45 feet high. And when we go back, we'll look at the 3D view of that, and see you'll see that the 4th floor suddenly got much fatter. Okay, so now as we start talking about costing, within the system there are 2 approaches to costing. There's the uniformat approach, which those of you that are, I know the construction management students probably are familiar with this, where you're actually getting in and you're You're basically using a uniformat template, and then you're starting to define all of the parts of the building, by where they are. It's substructure and foundations. It's a special foundation, and we've got to have piles, and you start classifying and developing a quantity of piles, and it's piles are bought in linear feet, and they're $12 a foot, that kind of thing. So you can actually start, let's just say for grins, there's 2,000 feet of piles. You can start classifying your building using Uniformat, and you can actually do this all manually within the system. But the reason this is in here is not to do it manually. The reason this is in here is to connect to outside systems such as dProfiler, Beck Technologies dProfiler. You can actually take the model that's created within the system that has spaces and all those other things that come in the system, and you can actually export it as a BIM XML. dProfiler can take that BIM XML directly into dProfiler, do all of the magic that Beck Technologies does when they do estimating within their system, and they can go up to a very, very high level, or they can do parametric estimating within their system as well. They basically output a BIM XML back to the Enuma system, and then it basically fills out all of the costing based on the Uniformat. So that's the high level. We can't really do that in this discussion today, but that's the high level system that's within there, and just a teaser, I guess, as much as anything. And if Tammy wants to explore that further with you, we can make that happen at another time. Now, for the most part, people who are cost estimating within the system use this cost estimating approach, which again, it's very like what I showed you in the site work cost. The only difference is this costing automates to what it sees in the model. So I changed the model. These square footage cost and everything changes. Now, as you can see here, since we only had one space, it right now thinks it's only a 948 square foot building. Now, let's go. I'm going to go back here to the site settings. Actually, I'm going to go to the building settings. Sorry, and then the building tab under building settings. I'm going to select this building, and I'm going to go into the areas calculation here. And we have actually a drop-down box here that says, okay, I either estimate this building with square footage and a custom factor that I can set, or floor slabs and a custom factor that I set. Now, when I change that to floor slab, you noticed, hopefully you can see this, that my building gross calculated square footage now jumped to 208,927 square feet. So what the way this works is basically you decide, am I going to figure out all of my interior spaces, or am I just going to take my outside perimeter, my slabs, and let it calculate? The custom factor is often in an early planning project. You'll have the owner will give you a spreadsheet, or owners give designers a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet says, here's all of my usable square footage requirement, and it might come to 100,000 square feet, and they say, oh, by the way, we've got we figure that it'll take another 35. You'll have to add 135% to that to get to the gross square footage. So basically, we could theoretically say, okay, we've got one space in this building, and we're going to multiply it times 200, and we would be at a 189,600 square foot gross square foot building. So you have the ability here in a normal project where you've been given the spaces of saying, well, the multiplier for this building is 1.35, and then it multiplies the spaces and gives you what your gross area should be. So it becomes kind of the design to gross. Or you can, as we're going to do in this one, we're going to leave that at 1, and we're going to just take the slabs that are all the slabs that are in the building and add them all up. Now, in this situation, we may actually have too much square footage here because I really think we've got some overlapping slabs. So if there was a floor slab and a ceiling slab, we've now got 2 slabs in that. So we would need to check this to be careful, but that's how we get to the gross square footage that fits into the estimate. And so let's go back to the estimate. Okay, so now we're showing 208,927 gross square feet, which I think is hopefully closer to what everybody is working on when they're working on the Revit model. And we have the ability to come in and analyze these square footages on a number of different levels to do different things. So we can categorize the building as new construction or renovation. And then within whether new construction, we can actually categorize as high, medium, and low cost areas. So the way this is used, say you had a lobby with Class A finishes, and it was really, and your lobby you were really going to, it's going to have marble and the whole enchilada, and it's going to be a $450 a square foot deal. The rest of the space you're going to buy it. You're going to go pretty plain Jane. You're going to buy it at $225, $225. And you're going to have the basement in this thing's not going to be finished at all. We're going to be able to buy that at $150 a square foot. So if I would go in and classify my spaces based on these based on high, medium, and low like that, what will end up happening is it'll adjust the construction costs. So you have a bit more granularity than just saying it's cost per square foot. In addition, if there was a building on site that had to be demolished and it was going to cost $25,000 to demolish it, you can add stuff like that in. If the system will actually compute just sort of a standard add-on for furniture, fixtures, and equipment if you choose to do it, or you can put your own personal guesstimate in for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And let's just say that's $250,000 in this project. You can actually go in and add other costs that might happen. So you can add lines to this if you choose to. So you could add a line that would say, maybe there's a medical office on the 3rd floor, so we've got to buy some medical, in order to get that tenant signed up, we've got to add some medical equipment. And the doctor's told us that he needs $125,000 worth of medical equipment in the deal. And you go down basically with all that kind of stuff. If you had to, we're demolishing a building and we're having to give somebody a $30,000 payment, for their space, the land cost us $1.2 million. In the process, we were going to have to rent some portables that were another $34,500. And basically, you get through all that, fleshed out your estimate however you feel like you need to, and you basically drop to the bottom line, which gives you basically a project cost less site work. And that's that's pretty much that's pretty much what's involved with it. But let's back into let's see if we can get into the model. I'm going to go into the basement of this model. See what we got down there. And so in the basement, we have one slab, fortunately, and so Amber, we can't classify just slabs, right? As high, medium, or low. We only classify spaces.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do here just to make this work is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add a space into this building. the space came in as this little this room that is very small, and we're going to make it larger here shortly. So we're going to just make this this space match your square footage. At least we're at least going to eyeball match your square footage. And I'm going to rename this as parking garage. And you notice when I did that, I've got a whole group of other data points that pop up. Some of them are filled out and some of them aren't. I know right off the bat that I've created a 40,738 square foot space. Here's where I can basically classify it by the cost. So I'm saying that space is a low cost, not a high cost now. And when we go back to the estimate, what we'll see is that will have changed the estimate. I can actually do things like I can say, you know, I really don't have people in here obviously, but I can say that I want to allocate 10 square feet per person in that space. And you'll notice off the side over here that we actually now have a space that has a capacity of 4,074 people. So it does, you know, as Kamon mentioned in the training last time, and I think the time before, what we're trying to do is take a lot of the mundane computation things that designers and others have to do away, so that they're just sort of, you know, there's kind of, you don't have to worry about them. So in reality, there aren't going to be, you know, maybe the code says in this kind of occupancy you've got to have exits for one person per 200 square feet. So now I've got 204 people potentially down there. If you can even play little workarounds on this, and if you say, you know, most parking garages are like between 300 and 400 square feet per car. So if you said it's 350 square feet per car, and here you could say, wow, I can get 116 parking spaces down there, right? You said it's going to, well, it's a little bit worse because I get columns in it. It's going to be 400 square feet per car. I'm only going to get 102 cars. So you can, you know, some of these, you know, little creative workaround also does nice things with it. But they're that. You can also on the next tab, now that you've got a space, you can start classifying the space in other ways. So you can say, okay, this is it's not really parking or any of those, but let's say it's an office, so it's part of an office. You can classify it by department. So I'm going department 11 just happens to be parking in this case. You can start classing by Omni class. You can set the Omni class for the space. So let's see, I don't know that we have the one up for, let's just say it's a facility service space. If it were, you know, if you had multiple spaces beside each other, you can start classifying a STC between spaces. You can start classifying for floor loads. You know, it's a parking garage, big, you know, heavy duty. You know, lighting, all kinds of different things can be classified within that space, even at this very, very early level. So obviously you don't normally use this, but in a healthcare facility where an owner is giving a designer a very detailed space needs program, much of this information comes direct in from the spreadsheet that the owner might be giving the designer. So you're not even having to do the work to fill these out. They're coming right in from your requirements documents. If you want, you can start putting grids and start thinking about columns and all that good stuff. If you want to, there is the ability to move spaces between floors and things like that. And you can actually, if there's attachments, say you had a sketch from somebody who had already laid out this space, you would actually have a sketch referenced into it. So there's all kinds of things that happen once you've done once you've done your spaces that allow you to classify and do all kinds of other interesting things. So with that, let me save this real quick. Let's go back up to our cost estimate, And let's save this and then see what we got. Hopefully, see there? There's our 4752 square feet. Actually, because of this model being the way it is, it's kicked a lot of the square footage into. So when I put that space in, that's covering everything in the whole building. Um, so not a wonderful example, I guess, but if this were just the single space in the garage that was, however big it was, 40,000 square feet, you would see that, and then you would probably see most of the rest of the square footage in the building under the average category, and you might have had a lobby or a first floor at a higher category. And we could go back and create a new model and like show you that if anybody's really interested. But okay, so that's estimating. Let's go back into a couple of the other reports here, just to so we've at least touched on them, so you at least know to go in here and think about them. The lead, from a lead standpoint, within the system we have lead checklists. These lead checklists do not, they really are lead checklists. I would suggest they're really for use mostly in having discussions with others about how far down that road you're going to go, and what are the impacts of doing the different things that are necessary to get a lead rating on a building. And so, and we do have, these are not up to the absolute latest lead requirements at this point, but we have lead for new construction, core and shell, and existing buildings. So if we just basically pick this building and do proceed, what ends up happening is you get a checklist like this, and you basically have the option, the prerequisites you obviously have to do, but then you can go in, you basically have to know and understand what the credit descriptions are. This is not something that you just do totally seat of the pants. You need to at least read what is the criteria for site selection, and then you basically categorize them yes, no, or maybe is what it amounts to. Once you've done that, you'll see at the bottom it adds the points as you go, and as it hits the thresholds for silver, gold, and platinum, it will start telling you, you have achieved that level. And what I find in my practice, I use this only to have a discussion with the owner about these things, and then that keys off the discussion of what are the issues, what's going to happen in the project. It also starts getting people to understand that an awful lot of these are based on how a building is operated and maintained, as opposed to what I can do as a designer. And so this, like many of the tools within the Enuma system, is basically intended to get the discussion going, get, as Kimona Enuma says a lot of times, get the train wrecks happening here rather than out in the construction side, or out in the after you've expended a lot of time on the design process. It's always a problem when you get halfway into the project and somebody says, wow, X needs to change and it should have been thought of before. And this is to have those discussions at the beginning rather than in the middle or at the end when they're too late. You can, in here, we looked at Uniformat a little bit, we just looked at lead. You can look at the building systems as well. You can actually come in, and this is another one of those things that when an owner is providing a high-level requirements document, an owner that's been doing BIM a while may have this kind of stuff where you're actually classifying by Omni class, and you start defining the system so embedded within these spaces and in the building, you actually have the building class for Omni class, so you can start drilling down. We're in interiors, we're interior construction, interior doors. We're going to talk about entrance doors, and in that class, you don't really need to go any further than that, evidently, in this case. But now you're starting to define for specification kind of situation what what items associated with this project need to be specified. You've got let's see. We can also start looking at types within OmniClass. So in this case, we can look at let's look at medical lab equipment, emergency and trauma care. So you're drilling down at a high level. Many of these, what we find, these two are mainly being used by the healthcare business. Kaiser Permanente is starting to look at them. VA's looking at is using them in some cases. These are for the those higher detail projects. This is the kind of stuff where you'll often hear Kimona and I both saying there's a lot of detail in this system, even though from a graphic standpoint it's very, very low level graphics. It's high level everything else. Okay, and so with that, let's see. I'll just tap on it because I don't think it's been touched at all in any of the previous discussions. There's also, you can drill down into spaces and start both allocating data to spaces. You can start many of the particularly federal government clients rate their spaces by how MDI is Mission Dependency Index. They rate their spaces by how important it is to their business mission. They rate them by serviceability. How close does the space use align with the needs of what's happening in the space? Facility Condition Index, where does the building stand relative to, this perfect, totally maintained building? And they're able to use these through the system and through all kinds of other things to do stuff like analyze where do they spend their money first, which spaces need to be maintained first, all those kind of things. And again, many times these come filled out from clients. We have particularly university clients who use this stuff right here to do what are being called live master plans, where rather than being updated every 5 years, the master plan is actually a living, breathing document. And so as they look at their spaces and they're starting to get space deterioration, they actually have a database that feeds this to, so the facility condition goes up and down depending on the actual quality of space and how much maintenance is done and all kinds of things like that. And so with that, we're at 6:22. We're at 5:22 Central, 6:22 Eastern here, and I think we're approaching the end. Amber, are there other questions and that we can...
I think they just I asked them to attach the Revit file, and I actually have it on my computer over here. I'm not sure how much I could show, but if you want, I could actually talk a little bit about Revit, because I do see that they have rooms, however, they're not placed in their model. And
okay.
I'm not a super Revit expert, but I at least know how to get a Revit model into the Enuma system.
Yeah, well, why don't you show them that? But while you're moving that over, let me give you the screen.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I noticed that Lee Fithian had a question here about installing the Navisworks plugin. The Navisworks plugin is just like a lot of the other pieces to this. You have to start classifying these building information modeling tools by their use and by their complexity. So the Enuma, you have to look at where in the whole spectrum of tools things fall. The Enuma system falls in that planning, organization, staging type of thing. That can be done in Navis and several other tools that are out there, but they tend to be a higher level detail thing. So if you're going in, if you're doing clash detection against a highly complete model, like at construction document level or during construction, Navis is, I don't know how to say it. Navis is a cat's meow. I mean, because it does higher level things such as clash detection, things that the Enuma system maybe doesn't even want to do. Um, but unless you're doing that, you don't need to load Navis.
Yeah, and I personally am not very familiar with Navis. I haven't worked with it. We have another
Yeah.
subject expert in the office that deals with this. But
Right,
I
right. But
pulled up
those are
their,
higher level tools, so keep
yeah,
that for higher level work, I guess is what I'm
yeah.
saying.
I created a room schedule really fast to see what was going on, and I see that rooms have at least been created, but they're not placed. Um, so if I go quickly onto their floor plans using the room tool, I'm just going to place some spaces. And obviously this isn't all of their spaces, but then using the plugin here, let's save this. Let's see if I'll be able to import something before we're done here.
Hopefully.
Okay. All right. And just to make it fast, I'm not going to use any furniture because if you do have a bunch of furniture within your model, you can import it as long as it's contained within the room. So, but for right now, for time purposes, I'm going to skip it. All right.
You're just gonna leave it in New York? Or are you gonna move it
Yeah.
somewhere? The just for what you were seeing there is the system defaults to New York City. So the area that Amber's showing right now is actually underwater. So see, I'm sitting out here in the middle of a hurricane.
Yes, I hope that my friends out there are all right. I've talked to all but one so far, so
Okay, now it's finger crossing. Look at that.
yeah.
Okay, so really the issue with that model is that the rooms need to actually be placed. Is that right?
Yeah, when I come across that error and like I said, I'm not a super expert when it comes to Revit. I just know how to work with it within the terms of the Enuma system. And usually when I come into that error personally, if a room is not placed, that's usually between I placed it and then I deleted it, or I tried to move it to a different floor, or I placed its information, but I didn't actually define its boundaries. So I don't know. There may be someone else that's more capable of explaining this, but let's go into some of the floors of this building. Yeah, so there we go. So the
There's your
model
spaces.
itself will be capable of importing the spaces as long as they're placed, and it may just be a matter of using your room, your walls, and your wall separator or room separator lines, and then placing the rooms like I showed. So I hope that
Right.
that helps a little bit.
Right, and so once they've done that, then the building square footage should all match.
Yes.
Yes, and I noticed that Tammy had put that the construction management students are going to be using Navisworks. So the idea on all this is that by being able to exchange data to tools that do specific jobs, Navis is a wonderful tool for doing high-level analysis and things like clash detection and very detailed 4D and things like that. Um, that really is what the Enuma system's all about, is being able to tie to those things. It acts as the center point where you can pull things in and move things around and manage the data and then push them out to the higher level tools as you need them. And so, Tammy, there's no the Navis plugin from, I haven't actually tried it myself, but I understand it works just fine and does a should work once you've got models that you can actually push that way. Okay, and so with that, we're at our 6:30 time. If there, I don't know, Amber, were there other questions that you were tracking before and that we need to look at or not?
No, it just seemed to be the cost estimating, which we covered. We looked into Revit.
Okay. Okay. Well then, with that, I thank you all for taking your time and spending it with us. Send Kimon or I an email if you have questions. Actually, even better yet, use BIM mail within the Enuma system and send us a BIM mail, and so we can respond if the students who are building these Revit models need more help. Between Amber and we have 2 or 3 people who are really Revit experts who aren't online right now, but we can get them hooked up and give you some more guidance if you feel like you need it. But just keep chugging. It's good that you're. I mean, all you can do is on this stuff is what I call fail fast and move on. So try things. If they don't work, try something else. If you get to a place where you're totally log jammed, either go on to the bugs and comments and post there, or send BIM mail and ask for help. And with that, I guess I'll we'll shut down, and thank you very much for attending. I guess we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye. Bye.